So, you know, when you reached out to me, Josh, one of the things that I thought was important to talk about on this video that you don't see very much out there is sort of some of the challenges and difficulties that come with farming. And this is not unique to the Southeast. It's really anywhere where somebody is trying to do field production, whether it's a 1/4 acre market garden or 10 acres of row crops. You know, the great equalizer for all of us is Mother Nature. So I know since you've been here, we've talked a few times about the weather that we experienced this spring. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit was some of the challenges that means for the farmers that are dealing with it. So, you know, part of what I wanted to illustrate here was that not everything is perfect all the time, and not every crop works out regardless of the varieties you select, your fertility program, your compost program, or how skilled one may or may not be as a grower. So a couple of the main challenges that we faced earlier this year, late spring, was one with our potatoes. This was our potato area here. They did very well this year. We had excellent production. And then as they were starting to set tubers, the Colorado potato beetle started moving in at the same time we started this period in May where we received 10 inches of rain and we didn't see the sun for 14 days. Well, that makes any sort of treatment program very challenging for the Colorado potato beetles. And it also starts creating a situation for root crops where disease and rot could start setting in. It created problems for our bean crops where they really resent having, you know, excessive moisture on top of them all the time. And then with our particular soil type here, we're really high in sand, pretty low in organic matter, as we are just second year into our soil building. And despite all of the compost that we put out on the beds, we see a lot of our fertility run through the beds and out of the bed in a very short period of time, particularly our nitrogen. And so what I wanted to show and illustrate here was some of the challenges that we're faced with. And our beans that were productive for a short period of time really didn't thrive this year. Our carrots, which we're kind of known for, we're on, you know, teetering on the brink of some crop failures as the tops have been completely overrun with disease. The roots are still great, but from a marketing perspective, that means that we're now bagging our carrots instead of selling beautiful fresh carrots with tops, even though just a few weeks ago they were beautiful fresh carrots with tops. And I just wanted to make sure that folks that are either in this field just remind themselves that it doesn't matter, you know, how long you've been in it, how many resources you have, how much experience you may have as a grower, but Mother Nature is always going to be that great equalizer. And for anybody that's starting a farm or starting to sell produce commercially, whether it's at the farmer's market, an on-site farm stand, or for a CSA, you've got to give yourself a little leeway, and you can't be too hard on yourselves when you run into issues and problems that either you don't have an answer for or you don't have a solution for, because sometimes it doesn't matter how well prepared you are. You know, there's going to be issues that arise with pest pressure, disease pressure, and other problems that you didn't foresee in your crop plan.
All right, let's go take a look at some of this stuff.
Let's take a look.
All right, so what are we looking at here?
So here we've got our yellow and purple wax beans, pole beans, runner beans, whatever folks like to call them. These are the Carminat and Monte Gusto varieties from Johnny's Selected Seeds. These varieties are known as being really great productive hybrids, produce a beautiful yellow wax bean and purple wax bean. And what we're looking at here, these two beds were our very first succession. You can see this little underdeveloped bean at the top. And these went in and were already up a foot or two on the trellis by mid-May when that weather set in. And after weeks and weeks of rain and gray weather, the plants just really started looking deficient and unhappy, and were far less productive than they should have been. The other thing is, despite great staling, you know, stale seed bedding tactics, flame weeding, things like that, this is still second year soil. So when you have nothing but rain in a crop like beans for a month of the 2 months they've been in the ground, you know, your weed pressure starts exploding underneath. They're not something that can be easily cultivated through. As the plants are kind of struggling due to inappropriate fertility, inappropriate levels of moisture, that plant then becomes more susceptible to pest damage, or starts putting out those signals to the local pest population that, hey, here's a plant that we could go and hit. So, the Japanese beetles move in and start defoliating stuff or taking flowers off, and you just find yourself on a slippery slope where your production is not there. And thankfully we had a second succession next to us, so those were actually germinating at the time of all that rain. They performed a lot better, but still struggle a bit. We've had really rough weather this spring. We had very late frosts, tons of daily thunderstorms where we get an inch or two of rain in 30 minutes, and then no rain for a few days, and then an inch or two of rain in 30 minutes. So between the leaching of the soil, the excessive moisture and humidity, and then the heat setting in for summer, I just wanted to show some areas of the farm that were less than ideal and didn't work out as well as we thought, despite investing in a good market garden variety, despite being on top of our planting, and fertility program. We're exposed to the elements out here, and we're at the whim of Mother Nature. So
as a farmer, independent of how many years you've been farming, you learn something new every year, right? And so what was your takeaway from this? Like, what would you change for next year?
More tunnels.
More tunnels. Yeah, I keep hearing that, man. I say that all the time, but
protected culture is really the permanent solution. So if you're somebody that's got a little business background or follows Ben Hartman, in his lean farm program, the idea behind continual improvement in any business, farming which is no different than any other business, is to find permanent solutions to deploy so that it's never a problem again. Now, we don't necessarily want to cover 100% of our farm with caterpillar tunnels. I would think that over the next couple of years we will likely move towards that. Yeah, I think controlling the quantity of watering, controlling the level of erosion, the amount of moisture running through your beds is sort of the first step. And from there, it really, it really depends on a lot of other factors as to what else you may be dealing with, because tunnels come with their own challenges, whether it's, overheating or disease or pests that are all, sort of concentrated in this enclosed space, and those can cause issues of their own. So
I know one of the issues in the Piedmont and North Carolina, and maybe probably a lot of parts of the South, is just those heavy, intense storms where you'll get inches in a couple hours. And so I think the tunnels is a huge way to take care of that.
It is. However, I'll tell you, the tunnels aren't a permanent solution really for that either, because a certain amount of water still capillates through the ground and saturates the ground even within the tunnels. And then you're also dealing with the excessive runoff that come off the tunnels. So you've got a few things to think about when you're planning your tunnel placement, when you're installing drainage or drain tile around the tunnel to funnel that runoff off your fields. And really it just, the overall farm plan needs to consider all of these factors depending on the area that you're growing in. And absolutely, in the Piedmont and North Carolina, I mean, it's been, a daily thing here. Growing in the tunnel really has, I think, more advantages than disadvantages. But again, as a second-year farm and as farmers who are still learning and developing their growing skills, we've discovered no matter what you plan for and how detail-oriented you are with your planning and your execution, that things are going to come up that you couldn't have ever anticipated. One of the things that has come up for us, and that is in our soil out here, is a bacterial wilt, which contributes to basically the disease and loss of solanaceous plants, cucurbits, things like that. So through some recent research and testing, we've discovered that we have bacterial wilt present in our soil. And despite having used grafted tomatoes that are resistant to certain disease and virus, the type of weather that we dealt with earlier in the spring, when we had weeks and weeks of wet weather, the entire ground within our tunnels had reached bed saturation, which, if you're not familiar with, means basically the maximum amount of water that a soil can hold before it's oversaturated or to the point of runoff, to where we didn't have to irrigate in the tunnels for multiple weeks in spring because of how saturated the ground was. Bacterial wilt can be managed, even if it's in your soil, by having raised beds, grafted plants, maintain a consistent moisture level without things becoming too wet or saturated for a period of time. However, when conditions are optimal for the growth of this particular bacteria, it will enter plants and will affect their ability to uptake water and nutrients, to where, as you see here, you'll have the entire plant wilt from top to bottom, and then this plant needs to be removed and put in our burn pile before the plant dies in its entirety and actually releases the bacterium back into the soil. So again, I'm not an agronomist or an expert. I've really spent a lot of time over the last 4 to 6 weeks educating myself about this issue, learning as much as I can about it, and we have some strategies as to how we're going to combat it next year. But this year, what we've had to do is just cull plants as quickly as we see it occurring, so that it doesn't continue to spread to nearby plants. But as we'll show you here in a second through these few tunnels, we've had some spots where it's spread quickly, and it's still affecting our plants day to day. Every week we're culling more plants that are affected by it and trying to control it the best we can to get through the summer growing season and maximize production with what we have. I just wanted to make sure that you know, we kind of illustrate some of those things while you were here today. You see a lot of videos that show the best side of everyone's farms when they're featured online. And you know, the most important thing is folks who are starting or who are bootstrapping their operation, or who, you know, maybe don't have a lot of resources to get the ball rolling. You've got to understand that no matter what you plan for, you can have issues that you could never foresee. And I, you know, hope that people are not discouraged by it. That really what it does is you know, spark some creative troubleshooting, or spark some creative solutions to where, you know, you can figure out how to mitigate a disease like this and how to do better in the future.
I think it's really awesome of you to obviously be willing to share this, but not only that, but have you wanted to share this stuff. And I think that as a farmer, when your crops fail, it feels like you personally failed. And I think everyone needs to realize that it happens to all of us.
Oh, definitely. And, you know, there's, again, I think it's important for folks to understand that, you know, it doesn't matter what those videos online that people watch look like, that, you know, behind the scenes, farming is one of the most difficult occupations for a reason, because it doesn't matter how experienced a grower you are, or how busy your farm is, or how much produce it sells, or how good your market is, or how much you can sell a bunch of radishes for. You know, what matters is perseverance and hard work, and having a backup plan for your backup plan for your backup plan. Because you know, since the dawn of time, all of the anecdotes about farming have to do with, you know, how long it takes for people to go broke farming. And that doesn't have to be the truth of small farms, and it doesn't have to be the truth of large farms or agriculture on a whole, but what people need to understand is that no matter what you plan for, expect, you know, roadblocks and speed bumps and hurdles to be thrown at you every season along the way, and be prepared to be positive and be creative and come up with solutions and figure out how to work past it, because you know, the reward is well worth the work. So despite watching some tomatoes fail, you know, I know we also sent 500 pounds out to market today. So you know, thankfully we had backups for our backups, and we'll get through with tomatoes all season. And by the end of the year, we might be down to 2 tomato plants, but by God, we'll have had tomatoes all season, and we'll figure out how to do it better for next season.
All right. Thanks for sharing.
Hey, thanks for having us.